So I have a quick question for you. Would you rather be a beginner who's always excited to make new art, learn, and grow, or an advanced professional artist with the skills to make any kind of artwork you want, but never be proud of any, and I mean any, of your work? Leave your answers in the comments below and please share why, because I'm really curious. If you're a returning subscriber, then you're already aware that I'm currently on a journey of rediscovering my creative spark. And this involves a lot of, internal reflection. And while I was reflecting and looking back at my old work to see how far I've come, that's when I realized the difference in my relationship with the art that I make now versus then. So I'll give a quick example to give a bit more context for what I'm about to say. Here are some artworks that I made between 2018 to 2020. And here are some artworks that I made between 2023 to 2024. Now this might come as a surprise to some of you, but I actually prefer my older artworks in comparison to the more recent works. And let me explain. Now on the surface, I know that these works aren't necessarily bad, and to be honest with you, these were some of the best artworks that I had ever made up until then. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone, I really focused on the details. Honestly speaking, they're not bad, they're really not bad. But every time I look at them, I feel absolutely nothing. Even though these artworks are technically better than the previous two, I feel so much more joy when I look back on these artworks instead. So the real question is, why? Why is it that even though my technical skills have improved, I don't feel as proud or as confident with my more recent work in comparison to the work I made as a beginner? This idea has been on my mind for quite a while now, so I thought I'll make a video sharing my thoughts on this topic and see if there's anyone out there who maybe feels the same way, because once again, I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. While I share my thoughts on this topic, I thought it would be fun to redraw this character that I made back in 2020. Now this piece is actually a redraw of an original character that I drew back in 2017, I believe, and I've redrawn her over the years a few more times. I have just one single rule for this redraw, and that is to really focus on enjoying the process as much as possible. I'm actually really excited because I haven't done a redraw in like so long. Actually, I think this is the last redraw that I actually ever made, so we'll see how this goes. Before we get into the main topic of this video, let's talk a bit about my idea for this redraw. As I mentioned before, I have drawn this character multiple times across the years, and each time I've kind of changed her design up a bit. For this version, however, I want to draw elements from all 4 variations while upgrading it to feel more, I guess, in line with the kind of art that I make now. So rather than just making her a random girl standing there holding like a milkshake, I'm gonna add a little bit more character to her design. And the first thing that came to mind was this 1950s diner waitress type of character. So that's what I've decided to go with. I made a list of elements that I want to keep from the previous designs in order to make sure it still feels like a redraw and authentic to the original, and things that I can switch up and change if need be. So I have a mood board right here that I made on Miller Notes, which are not sponsoring this video, but it's perfect for me to gather all my reference and ideas in order for me to kind of get a general idea of what I want to make. If you want to take a closer look at this Miller Note board, I have a link in the description. There's really nothing to it, but just for those who are interested. Okay, so now that we have a general idea of the character design, we can jump right back to the main topic of the video. So I really love the idea of redrawing old artwork because it's literally the best way to visually see your growth. In an era where we are constantly observing others, we tend to forget to observe ourselves, which is where the first problem begins. Now, when it comes to comparison, most people think of comparing themselves with other artists, but that wasn't the case for me. While I do look up to certain artists, I never directly compare myself to them, at least not in the way that can be problematic. Rather, for some reason, I created this ideal version of myself in my head who is way ahead of me, skill and career-wise. And instead of looking up to this version, I simply compared my current self to it and beat myself up for not being there yet. And I find it so ridiculous because, imagine comparing yourself to a version of yourself that literally doesn't even exist. If that isn't a whole new level of being in your head, I don't know what is. When I was still a beginner, I never saw this ideal version as a version that I had to be at, but more as a version I aimed to get to. And I guess as the years went by, somewhere along the lines, I started feeling a sense of urgency to get to that level, with the state of the industry crashing and, just a lot of uncertainty in the world. I feel like I need to already be at a certain level. So at the end of each artwork, even if the result was technically much better than my old work, I would stress about how it could and should have been better. Which leads us to the second problem. Now, before I go further, I just want to briefly mention that I do understand the importance and need to always strive for improvement. As humans, if we don't have that drive, it's most likely that we won't put in the effort to become better and improve our skills. But there's a fine line between trying to improve and being your own worst critic. Emphasis on worst critic. While I highly believe in self-critiquing your work rather than blindly ignoring your mistakes, if you never give yourself credit for anything and only focus on what could be better, you're going to drive yourself insane. At least, that's what happened to me. Every time I would make an artwork, rather than appreciating it for what it was, I would hyperfixate on the problems, the flaws. Even when I couldn't notice a flaw, I would say things like, there's probably something wrong with it. Sure, I can't see it. Sure, it looks good to me, but I know once I post this, someone else with more skills is going to notice those flaws. So, to avoid getting my ego hurt, I humbled myself. I would say things like, what do you mean this is your best work? It's not that good. How can you be that good? It's not like you're a professional or anything. Don't let this get to your head. You still have a very, very long way to go. And honestly, you know what? Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm sure this all sounds stupid. And valid, it does. But really, that's honestly how I felt. When I was a beginner, if I made something I didn't like, I would just think, well, I'm a beginner. I have so much more time to improve, which is such a healthier mindset to have. But now, I feel like I already need to be at a certain level if I want to be a successful artist. So instead of feeling proud of the artwork that I created, art that had literally surpassed all my previous work, I would tell myself, it's alright, but it's not great, so it's not good. So as you can tell by now, I am a chronic overthinker. And that has eventually led to me constantly overthinking during the creative process as well, turning the very act of making art into this overwhelming mental battle. Every time I would start a new artwork, whether it's a sketch, drawing, or painting, I would overthink every single step before I even began. I ended up starting a lot, and I mean a lot, of unfinished projects because I was too scared to complete them for the fear that they wouldn't be good enough. When you're a beginner artist, you don't really have a trained eye to spot the flaws in your work, simply because you don't know any better. So no matter how off my drawings looked back then, I couldn't see the imperfections. This is something I really miss about my past self. Call it beginner's ignorance or whatever, but there's something freeing about creating without overthinking every step and just focusing on enjoying the process. Back then, I wasn't obsessing over every single artwork. Rather, I was constantly making new pieces because I was just excited to bring all my ideas to life. But now, I can barely remember making any of my most recent works. Not in the sense that I forgot that I made them, but because I wasn't present in the process of creating it. Especially when it comes to my art school portfolio. The only thing I remember when I look back on it is how I was rushing to finish it before the gala and making decisions on the fly, completely detached from the entire process. probably because I was heavily sleep deprived. You know that feeling when you're writing an exam and there are only like a few minutes left? So you just start writing whatever you can without thinking too deeply? That's exactly how I felt while working on it. So of course I don't feel any connection to the art I made during that time, no matter how good or decent they turned out. When you're unable to find joy in the process of creating or even in the final result, you start to question the reason why you're doing it in the first place. But honestly, I think hitting that low was what I needed to realize that I wasn't just struggling with my art, I was losing my love for it. At its core, we create art because we enjoy it. We enjoy bringing all our ideas to life. That's the one thing all creatives share, regardless of their medium of choice. And without that love, no matter how polished or advanced our skills become, we will never truly be satisfied with the final result. And that's something that I really, really miss about being a beginner artist. That raw and authentic passion to create without giving a care in the world. Now, I don't want to romanticize this too much. I definitely had my fair share of struggles back then. And let's be real, my old art isn't exactly something to brag about. But looking back, what I miss the most about my beginner self is that sense of freedom. And now that I've recognized that, I'm actively trying to channel more of that energy moving forward. So, to sum it up, my beginner self wasn't technically better than I am now. However, she was simply in love with creating. Lately, I've been trying my best to prioritize being more present and enjoying the process of creating art rather than always stressing about how it's going to turn out at the end. And I'm happy to say that it's been working. Towards the end of last year, I got back into making more personal art. This time, hyperfixating on the feeling of the creative process. And I've honestly been having so much fun, so much more fun than I ever had in the past 2 years. So if you enjoyed this video, then consider watching this video next. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video.